The Hisense U8H, Hisense's first, and for now anyway, only mini LED TV. Is it a must or a bust? Let's find out. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and I am legitimately excited to make this review video because the Hisense U8H is, well, it's really something. This is a TV worth talking about a lot. Once again, we're looking at a Hisense TV with performance that well exceeds its own claims, taking the whole under-promise, over-deliver mantra to new levels. Its value proposition is a huge factor for consideration, so we've got to talk about that, and we've got some interesting philosophical questions to debate, such as, is there such a thing as too bright when it comes to TVs? If that's not a nice bit of foreshadowing, I don't know what is. Anyway, like I said, there is a lot to talk about with this TV, which is actually a really good thing. So sit back, relax, grab a beverage. We're about to have some fun talking about the Hisense U8H Mini LED TV. Before we dive into it, I want to say thank you to all of you who jumped into the comments on my unboxing video for this TV. You all came through with a bunch of helpful questions and suggestions on what you'd like to see covered. And although I won't be able to get to all of that, I think I'm gonna cover most of it. So never let it be said that you watching right now don't have a voice when it comes to what these videos can look like. And since we're on the topic, here's my usual reminder to smash, slap, tap, or gently nudge the buttons and icons of your choice down below, and leave me a comment about what you think of this TV and whether you might buy one having seen this review. Thanks so much. I love chatting with you guys. Okay, let's do this. So I want to start by picking up where we left off in our unboxing video, which if you haven't seen it, here's the link, in which I had expressed some concerns and frustrations, albeit relatively small ones, as I got this TV set up and running. That means I've got to start with some criticisms of this TV, which isn't the way I normally like to do things, but since the overwhelming majority of stuff I have to say about the Hisense U8H is positive, I think it's gonna balance out okay. So with that said, the U8H can be a quirky TV at times. Now, I've tried to filter out the kind of user interface frustrations that really only affect a reviewer like myself and keep my observations to factors that I think will affect you if you end up buying this TV and using it at home. And with that in mind, I will say that getting the U8H all set up the way you'll like it most takes a little bit more work than I'd like. But rather than just complain about it, let me show you what you need to do to get the most out of the U8H. Now, the first thing I want to show you is essential. If you want to get the maximum brightness out of this TV, you have got to do this one thing. First off, get the TV out of its default Eco picture mode. Filmmaker mode or one of the theater modes for SDR would be best, but pick anything other than Eco. Then, under the picture settings menu, right here under backlight, there's an option for the ambient light sensor. By default, in several modes, this is turned on. And if it is turned on, it will stomp down on the brightness of the TV depending on how much light it registers in your room. Now, you may like the idea of that feature, and if you do, then go ahead and give it a whirl, but also try turning it off to see if you like how the TV looks that way, because you will not get the full brightness potential of this TV, which is monumental, by the way, if you have this turned on and have anything other than a super bright room. Also, very important, you have to make this change for apps and HDMI inputs independently, and you have to do it for SDR and HDR and Dolby Vision content, again, individually for apps and HDMI inputs. Now, if you want, you can click the Apply to All Sources button, and that'll save you a little bit of time. This work is worth the effort, but I'm worried folks are gonna miss this and thus miss getting the most out of this TV. So if you or someone you know buys this TV, be sure to share this video with them. Next, and this is especially important if you're connecting a next-gen game console, but also important for other HDR sources like a 4K Blu-ray player or even a streaming box or stick. There is an enhanced HDMI setting you'll want to turn on. Otherwise, you will not get anything past 4K 60 from a game console like the Series X here. And frustratingly, this setting is not in the picture settings menu, which I think is a big mistake. It's hidden in the quick settings menu, and the only way to get to it is with this button on the remote. So click that and enable enhanced HDMI for each HDMI input. Very important. Oh, and another heads up. In order to keep the TV from backing out of your content while making picture settings adjustments, make sure to go directly to picture settings after clicking the little settings cog button on the remote. If you click the settings menu box here, it'll back you out of your content, and that makes it harder for you to see the effect of your changes. Sadly, going straight to picture will pause your content, but at least you can see an image to kind of gauge whether you like the result of your adjustments or not. Finally, and I promise I'm about to get to picture quality, I have to mention that I experienced a rather serious bug when I first got this TV. Now, it's since been fixed with an update, but out of the box, the TV's tuner did not work correctly. And that had an impact on viewing content in the apps too. Like, after it blacked out on broadcast content, I couldn't see or hear content on Netflix, Disney+, HBO Max, or any of the other apps. Again, this bug has now been fixed, but you need to make sure you get this TV to update when you get it home, because if you don't, I fear you're gonna have some problems. And you know, this brings up a rather important point here. This kind of firmware/software bugginess is something I worry about with all smart TVs. And I'm glad Hisense has acted quickly, but it's hard not to think about this when I think about whether to recommend the U8H. But we'll come back to that in a moment. As promised, it's time to talk about picture quality, and that means it must be time for Numbers for Nit Nerds. Now, this is a section where I dive into some of the performance metrics for you enthusiasts out there. If you just want the takeaway on the picture quality, you can click the time code for the next section down in the description. So, using my C6 profiled to an i1 Pro 2 along with Calman Ultimate software, I measured peak brightness in filmmaker mode and theater day mode at just over 2,000 nits in HDR. Considering this TV only promises 1,500 nits, I think that is pretty stinking amazing. In SDR, the TV peaked at over 1,200 nits, and that was in filmmaker mode, which is the most conservative of the bunch. Full field white came in at just under 1,000 nits. Folks, that's insane. So if we want to talk about bright room TVs, this is it right here. The U8H is as capable as any TV I've ever reviewed at doing battle with ambient brightness in the room. Its anti-glare treatment is okay, nothing remarkable like, say, the Samsung QN90B, but with brightness like that, glare is rarely going to be an issue. You're just not gonna do much better in that department. So how about the other end of the spectrum? How are the black levels? Well, there's good news and not as good news. The mini LED backlight system on the U8H is remarkably good. Like, from what I've seen so far, and I've watched this TV just watching content for many hours now, it's as good as just about any TV I reviewed, which I think is a huge win for Hisense. Blooming is just this side of non-existent. I'm not exaggerating, okay? Like, combined with the TV's brightness, you're not likely to see much blooming at all. At least, I haven't managed to trick the TV into showing it yet, and I think that means most folks aren't likely to see any at all. Subtitles down in the letterbox bars? No problem. The blacks are deep and they stay black. I'm super impressed. There is a potential caveat though. When using a couple of key test patterns and measuring the gamma curve of this TV, it does appear to be crushing blacks to a fairly significant degree. Now, you know I don't rely purely on measurements because those patterns don't do a good job of triggering the TV's processing capabilities, so it's hard to know how it handles black levels in context. And for most of the content I've watched so far, I did not get the feeling that crushed blacks were really a problem. Not a rampant one anyway. Now, to be clear, I'm not just trying to put a positive spin on what the measurements are showing. I'm saying that I've not been able to see any evidence yet that crushed blacks are a problem with real content. Now, if I do in the future, I'll update you. Maybe a side-by-side with another TV will bear that out. We'll see. There does, however, seem to be an impact on color. So let's talk about that. The measurements I got and the real content experience I've seen show that medium-low all the way up to insanely bright colors look excellent, and they measure very accurately. It's in the dark color areas that we start to see some errors that aren't just measurable. Well, you can tell that darker colors don't seem to have a lot of color to them. So there's an indication that there's some low luminance performance stuff going on there. I'm being super picky though, comparing this TV to TVs that cost more than double. So I'm gonna keep that in mind going forward. As for processing, Well, here's an area where we start to see the difference between the U8H and TVs that cost double or more than double. Upscaling from 1080p test patterns shows a bit of aliasing and artifacting, although when I watch broadcast TV, it doesn't look any worse than usual. It just looks like it looks, which is not great. It's just not cleaned up quite as well as I've seen from some other premium models. Also, motion from content under 60 Hertz shows some noticeable stutter, and anything less than full-on soap opera effect inducing motion smoothing doesn't do much to help it. In fact, this film setting in the motion menu does nothing for me. So yeah, I think a lot of movie watchers are gonna notice some flashing and stuttering issues. Now, I'm kind of on the fence about this. In some ways, I think the rest of the picture quality helps me to get over this. And then with the price, yeah, I'm thinking I could deal because everything else is so good. But it's still lingering in the back of my mind as I come to decide whether or not to recommend this TV. So from a picture quality perspective, the U8H is doing some straight up amazing things. It has a stunningly vivid, bright, deep picture with colors that pop right off the screen. The black levels are so good, this TV starts veering into OLED territory. So paired with the super high brightness, the contrast is just off the charts. And that is gonna dazzle a lot of folks who consider this TV. Perhaps it lacks some of the finesse that much more expensive TVs do, but there is no doubt that you are getting way more for your money with the U8H than with, I think, any other TV on the market right now. The value proposition is simply off the charts. Right now, this is looking like the budget Videophile's darling. We'll have to see how the new TCL 6 series looks, but for now, this TV is undefeated in the value department. And for most folks, the picture quality is going to be a knockout. Now, I want to dive into this idea in a future video, but I do want to make mention here that the U8H could be considered by some to be too bright of a TV, specifically if you aren't interested in managing the picture settings between bright and dark environments. For instance, I just could not use the U8H in my bedroom at night with Filmmaker Mode HDR unless I back the backlight down a bit. It's just too bright. Even the theater night mode can be a bit intense at times. Now, you can use the ambient sensor and the auto dimming if you want, but I think it over dims the picture. Like, I want HDR highlights to punch up to 1000 nits, but the average picture level to be a bit more tame than I'm seeing with this TV. I guess another way of putting this is that the U8H can be made appropriate for darkroom viewing, and it is excellent for bright room viewing, but bouncing back and forth between those tasks takes a little bit of hands-on management, so keep that in mind when you're considering this TV. Okay, moving on from picture quality. With that massive subwoofer on the back, I had to give the U8H's sound quality a deep dive, and here's the deal. The sound is meaty. It's got deep bass extension, better than most TVs I've heard in terms of how deep it can go in the bass. The mid-bass section is a little chunky for me, but that adds to the power of the punch, and it is a punchy sounding TV. That subwoofer can only do so much though, and where the main drivers in the TV pick up the sound, they leave a little bit of the upper mids out, so there is this perceived lack of cleanliness or clarity. Dialogue is certainly intelligible though, I'm not complaining about that. In fact, I'm impressed. Overall, the sound on the U8H is well above par and puts out some of the biggest sound I've heard from a TV. But I'm still gonna suggest a soundbar. You knew that was coming, right? Oh, also, I wanted to note that the U8H does have a next-gen TV tuner, or ATSC 3.0 tuner. Local news, Judge Judy, reverse mortgage commercials, and Wheel of Fortune look about as good as they've ever looked. Honestly, I've yet to see any of the advantages that ATSC 3.0 has promised, though that may just be my market here in Portland, Oregon. One thing I am concerned about though is an occasional audio sync problem that I only noticed on the next gen channels, which by the way are clearly labeled in the pop-up graphics. It's hard to place fault on the audio delay, but there it is. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Now, as for gaming, we've got a 120 Hz native panel, 2 HDMI inputs that can do 4K 120 in HDR, VRR and FreeSync Premium, a decent game mode that reduces input lag to an average of 8 milliseconds, which puts it right up there with the lowest you'll find from most TVs. So it's responsive. As for picture quality, well, it's very bright and very colorful. Accurate? pretty close. I think LG's game preset looks a bit better, a bit more refined. But again, for the money, this TV is going to thrill a lot of folks who want an awesome gaming experience. And that leads me to the real takeaway here. For the price, this TV is astonishing. I mean, it would be an excellent performer if it cost 50% more than it actually does. But considering what you get for what you'll pay, it's just mind-blowing to me. Add to it that it offers very good performance without a calibration, and the fact that it needed precious little adjustment to the 2-point white balance to achieve amazing measurements. I think that just ups its value even more and puts it at the top of the Videophile's budget TV category. Like, if you're hungry for top-tier performance, but you just can't pay top-tier TV prices, you need to check out the Hisense U8H. It's just incredible what you get for the money. Can I recommend it though? Yeah. I'm gonna give a somewhat tentative yes here. I don't love the software bugs that I ran into. They gave me serious pause. Like, at one point, I was ready to just throw the remote through the window. But those issues were fixed fairly quickly. So that restored some of my confidence. It's just that I don't know how this TV is gonna perform in a year. That remains to be seen, but the TV's performance is just so good. I've gotta tell you that you need to check this TV out. It really is the big disruptor that I thought it would be. Thanks as always for watching, everyone. What is your confidence level with this TV? Please let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and here's 2 other videos that I think you'll like.